Born among the cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta, Clifton Tolbert overcame the discrimination of the Jim Crow era in the American South. His life has been one of success, leadership, and inspiration for people around the world. He's an entrepreneur, an important part of the civil rights movement, an Air Force veteran, a best-selling and Pulitzer-nominated author, a university trustee, and a consultant to elite businesses and to the highest levels of government. His work inspired the influential film Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, which was named after his book. Clifton Tolbert is one of America's leading thinkers and most celebrated success stories.
Welcome, everyone. I'm TAWNI FERRARINI, Senior Fellow at the Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise at Lindenwood University. I'm joined right now here with Clifton Tolbert, author, motivational speaker, among many, many other things. And today we're going to talk about the most challenging topic, the economics of discrimination. Clifton, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is an interesting topic on so many different levels, and it's a difficult one, but it deserves our attention because in one of the books that you helped author, Who Owns the Ice House, by your other co-author, his name is Gary
Schoeninger.
Yeah, the two of you talk about entrepreneurship at the heart of what your uncle did in order to establish an ice house in a period of very strong and aggressive racial discrimination. Do you want to give us a summary of what's in the book?
Yeah, you know, it gave me an opportunity to take a person to a very small place where everything was not, let's say, status quo, everything was not the way you exactly want it to be. So how do you decide to let your dream come true in a place where dreams are not often allowed to come true? Discrimination did exist in this small community, but Uncle Cleve had an internal fortitude, and that to me was the reason why I wanted to write the book, Who Owns the Ice House, because I wanted young men and women, no matter who they are from around the world, to understand that inside each of them is this internal fortitude room. Open that door and experience what can happen when you allow your own internal fortitude to help drive your daily actions.
And it was very much a story about discovery and creativity, and it was one in which inspired me, which I have not been exposed to the discrimination that was described in the book or some of the challenges that your uncle faced and the people around him. But what I saw was this like grit, where they were going to rise up, move around, and find ways to provide services that others valued in a way that not only benefited your uncle and other people, but actually helped a lot of other people too.
No, it's right that once you can catch hold of what's inside of you, because oftentimes you do not have the wherewithal to change the outside immediately. That change does take place, but it doesn't take place sometimes as quickly as you want. So what do you do when it's not moving that fast? Again, I go back to what's inside of you. And this is what I admire about Uncle Cleve. Yesterday, I admired yesterday and still admire today, because he should not have been doing what he was doing, but he did it anyway. And he did it with such, I would say, grit and determination that he was not about to fail. I mean, he became the Iceman. He became the businessman in our community, serving the entire community. And that within itself was a major event, because in our world of legal segregation, you had two of everything. In Glen Allen, Mississippi, for a long period of time, there was only one ice house. Mm-hmm. In our little small community of less than 500 people, you had African Americans, you had Caucasians, you had Jewish people, you had Chinese people, and you had one Italian grocer. We almost had the United Nations in Glen Allen, Mississippi, and they all had to buy ice from Uncle Cleve.
So to summarize, you know, in the economics world, discrimination does not make sense. It makes no sense whatsoever, which is the beauty of the story. And what was interesting about this book is that you saw discrimination taking place at so many different levels, as you just described. Ethnic, religious, it was everywhere present. And your uncle, instead of trying to like really take on through like active protest, what he did is he took on the challenge through quiet business. And people understood that he was helping. He was helping himself, he was helping his family, and he was helping his customers.
Right. I think, sometimes you look at the circumstances. You look at Uncle Cleve in the 1950s, 1960s. The cultural setup was different then. And I think the culture oftentimes plays a role in how we respond to the circumstances that we face. Now, if Uncle Cleve had lived today in the 21st century, I'm not quite sure how that would look. Well, obviously, probably wouldn't have had an ice house because there's ice out there in the refrigerator today. But what happens when the culture shifts, and that is the journey of humanity, is that when we travel back, we will all be able to see clearly the shift in culture. And when that culture shift, it also impacts how we handle our present circumstances.
And that is an important point that carries through the book, is because you're talking about an individual who looks at a challenge and assumes the responsibility of taking on the challenge versus kind of shifting that responsibility to somebody else. Uncle Cleve was responsible for himself on the business level as well as on the family level. And so he worked hard every day in order to bring profit to his business, because that's what helped him grow his business. But most and equally as importantly, I believe, in the book as I took it away, he was constantly mentoring others to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's, I guess it was perhaps at a family reunion, and we just happened to mention Uncle Cleve, but it's just set up a plethora of conversation because several people in the family had also worked for him when I left that I was unaware of. But what I find to be absolutely amazing is that his standards for excellence did not change. Every person faced the same set of standards that I had to meet in order to satisfy him. And that to me is very important. His standards for excellence, they were developed inside of him and they lived outside of him in the work that he did and the way that he did his work, but he also demanded that of us. He seemed to intuitively understand that business required certain attributes for sustained success. Didn't get it from the book. I don't know where he got them from. Maybe he watched. And I have a feeling that one of the great parts of success in entrepreneurship is our ability to really watch what others do and when they're doing something well and begin to, maybe take a pencil and a paper and just, they do that every day. Mm-hmm. And you write that down, and all of a sudden, in that process, I think my uncle began to give himself lack of an online education, but let's say an on-site education, OJT, watching other successful business people in Glen Allen. I think he began to say, okay, I can do this. Oh, that's why they do that. You began to ask questions in your own head. You began to hold conversations. You began to take notes. And over time, you began to understand, well, that's not a really big secret. I can do this. And then you set out to make it happen.
Oh, the personal connections to the entrepreneurial ones run through your book. Would you speak a little bit about the standards of excellence? Just summarize what they are, because they're attributes that all of us can learn from.
Well, the one thing that still rings true to me today is be on time. I mean, he had no concept of not being on time. And I lived probably 2 cotton fields away from the ice house. But I had to be there on time. So I would get up as early as I possibly could, and I would literally run across these 2 cotton fields. My goal was to beat Uncle Cleve to work. I never did, but that was my goal. When I got there, I was on time, but he was always there with his pipe. Wait, oh, you made it, boy. I said, no matter what I did. But I brought that into my life as well. And my son, he said, Dad, why do you always get to work before everybody? I said, because I'm the owner. I have to set the standards. And that to me is, I think that is often missing. We don't have the opportunity where standards are set, standards are met, and standards are embraced. And Uncle Cleve set the standards for my life as it relates to the professional world, and I still carry those through today.
And so be on time.
Be on time.
What about the way he treated conflict and he greeted hostility towards him?
Yeah, this is important because, as I said, this would have been in the late 50s, early 60s. Racism existed, discrimination existed. A bulk of his customers would have been white at that time, and many of them would not have necessarily recognized or appreciated his humanity, but they needed his ice. And I remember watching him literally treat everybody the same. And I think, now this is my own conjecture for this because we never had a conversation about this. I watched and I followed suit. But I think what he was doing, he was helping me to understand that he was being driven by his business to be successful. He realized the times in which he lived, but he also realized that if I was to be successful, I would have to watch him and to realize that there are always some ways to get around something and to not let that negativity just grab your life and make it part of your life. And that is what I have to think, that he may have gone home maybe a day or two feeling badly that someone did not recognize this really good human being in front of them. But he always knew he was that human being. And he never let another person's acts of ignorance take away from him his own humanity.
And that, I think, will resonate with some of the people, our social media followers, because we see people reacting so quickly to a lot of negativity when they have a personal choice. They can choose to react to it or not, and it helps define you whether or not you choose to react to those situations. And it was just amazing because I thought Uncle Cleve would not be caught up in all this craziness in social media with all the negativity and how it mushrooms. In fact, he would have been a leader. He would have treated each person with genuine respect, not because they necessarily deserved it, but because it was who he was.
That you hit something very important. That is who my uncle was. My uncle was this incredible human, this incredible man, this incredible businessman. And he had a sense of that. Now, it's important to keep in mind that you don't just go to the store and buy that attitude. Where does that attitude come from? Everyone does not have the opportunity to have that attitude. I would love to know, and I don't know, what made Uncle Cleve stand out in a world where standing out was the choice he took, but the obstacles that he faced as a result of that. He stood out as this businessman. And even today, dead 20 or 30 years now, you go to a family reunion, there will always be a conversation about Uncle Cleve. He was just that impactful within the black community as he was within the white community.
Well, my friend, I think we're going to be talking about you in the same way in 20 or 30 years because you're doing some incredible things yourself. And we are so happy to have you here helping us carry your message forward because we all can learn from it.
Well, let me say one thing about Lindenwood that is so important to me. As I was saying, opportunity is not something that everyone has in a box, but opportunity is what everyone needs in order to attach their efforts to the opportunity to create the success that you're looking for. If Lindenwood made a choice to bring me in during Entrepreneur Week, that provided an opportunity that has now moved almost into another year. But Lindenwood was at the forefront of providing me an opportunity. And had they not provided that opportunity, I would not have been able to put forth my effort to make it work. So there's a combination of what we do with and among each other that really brings about sustainability and really helps us to understand that we have the ability to make a difference in the life of the world around us.
And that's a great message for everyone to live by and to learn from. So we are a sum of our actions and interactions with others. And our hope is that when we look back and we reflect on our life and we look for opportunities to create value for others, sometimes it's not obvious that we can connect dots. When you were writing The Ice House, you were not thinking about Lindenwood University.
No, I didn't even know Lindenwood existed. When I wrote that book, and it's not the best story, but I had just discovered that I had cancer. And everything had the operations, everything was okay. But there was an entrepreneurial conference in Michigan, and the doctors had told me, you can't carry anything that weigh over 2 or 3 pounds. So one of the guys who worked for me, Doug, went with me to Michigan to carry the briefcase and everything. But I was so committed to keeping my word. That's another thing that I got from Uncle Cleve. You could go to sleep on his word. His word would not change. And I was so committed to keeping my word that I found myself in Michigan with myself and Doug, the only, and maybe one other person, knowing that I had just had surgery for cancer. But I said I would be there, and I had to figure out how to make it happen. And that, to me, is the essence of what I call living not just for yourself, but living for others as well, understanding the importance of keeping your word, and then bringing other people in to help you keep your word.
Yeah, and that's, I think many people have the impression that when we talk about economics, it's about me, and I, when actually it's about us, and we. If we want something to be sustainable and to do what benefits us, but also we bring a ton of people along with us.
Most definitely.
Which is the incredible story here. Now, throughout the book, we have some financial advice.
Yes.
And you talk about some of the things that are important, not only on the business level, but also on the personal level in the household. Will you speak to some of those points?
Again, I was lucky, and I mean that sincerely. The term mentor was not a term that we used when I was growing up, but if I would bring Uncle Cleve back today, I would say that those people that we define as incredible mentors would be willing to come and sit at his feet and learn from this man, because he was a mentor by nature. He wanted to pass something on. And one of the things that I remember most, how he handled finances, because everyone in the little community knew this is a term, Cleve got money. Now, that's a term within our black community. Cleve got money. But it was more than the fact that he had dollars, but he seemed to have had the sense of what it would take to get the dollars and how you would use the dollars rather than the dollars using you, and how you would save the dollars in anticipation of a challenge that might come along, and you would be able to handle that. And that is the one thing that I picked up. My son teases me today. He said, "Dad, you're just like Uncle Cleve." He's never met Uncle Cleve, but he's heard about Uncle Cleve all of his life. And he said, "Dad, you going to buy this?" I said, "Well, I can't buy this right now, Marshall, because I just got to make sure that if something happened to you or Mom, that everything is taken care of. You don't need to buy everything you see, son. That's why they have it in the store, to trick you. Don't buy everything you see." And this is what I learned from Uncle Cleve, is that tomorrow mattered. And you have to think about tomorrow today. And finances is a main part of that. Thinking about tomorrow, how you use your money, what you spend it on, and how you look at the saving opportunity that you have, so that your life and your wherewithal can impact others as well.
A very popular topic right now is one that involves debt. Do you have any advice or thoughts on the relationship between debt and your uncle?
My great joy in life is when I can tell my wife or my son, this is paid off. Just a couple of days ago, my wife said, "You need a pair of brown shoes." And I said, "Well, not really." "Oh yeah, you need a pair of brown shoes." "No, not really. I got a couple pair of black shoes." "You need brown shoes too." So we went on and on about that. I said, "Well, let me put it like this. Maybe I could use a pair of brown shoes, and I understand that." I said, "But what if Marshall, our son, who's an entrepreneur as well, and he's working really, really hard, what if he needs something from us in order to give him over the edge?" I said, "The brown shoes are not going to help him. But the money that I would save by not buying the brown shoes could help my son grow his business." That's what I learned from Uncle Cleve. Debt is not your friend. And you want to do everything you can to minimize it. and to use your money wisely.
Yeah, because Uncle Cleve lived in an era where he didn't have a credit card.
No.
He couldn't hop into a bank and get a loan.
No.
There weren't any government-sponsored programs to assist him, and yet he did some really incredible things despite the odds. And I think that that would just, it is so distant from our viewers today, myself included.
Yeah. You know, it's really quite interesting when I think about the great migration of Europeans from Europe into America, even in the settling of our country. It was problems that moved them across the ocean. And they had an ideal of creating something that they never had before, because many of them were serfs, which is kind of like the second rung above slavery. And they wanted to come to a place where their own minds and their own hands, their own hearts and head could come together to create something for themselves. They created an ideal. And I think what we are doing today, that ideal that may have transacted upon the ships that brought them into the Americas, those ideals are still good, and we're still working toward those ideals. But sometimes the ideals hit reality. So what do you do when the ideal hit reality? You kind of back up and realize nothing is wrong with the ideal, but how do I handle that when I see reality? And I think that is where maybe the government and leadership comes in, as it would in any country or company that makes a strategic plan, and that strategic plan hits reality, and all of a sudden something shows up that you hadn't planned on. You don't stop the strategic plan. You just find out, how do I make this work in spite of? And I think we always live in that world, that in spite of, who's going to come along and help me to accomplish this? Who's going to come along and help me to make this work? In Uncle Cleve's world, I think who came along for him may have been a couple of people that he had seen in a place called, I think, Water Valley, Mississippi, that I've never seen before, never been there. But he had to have brought something with him along the way that allowed him, when he got into business for himself, because he had failed in the cotton business. And for many people, once you fail, you just kind of turn inward and just stay there. But instead, he used that failure to really move him to the next level of business success. And he must have seen it somewhere before, I don't know with whom and by whom, to come out with that attitude that was completely and totally pervasive. Totally pervasive.
That's inspiring. So if you got called to Mars and you knew you were never going to be back on Earth again, what's the one message you'd want to send to everyone?
I would say this: never underestimate the value of your presence on this planet, because we have an incredible opportunity. Look at us today. You know, we haven't known each other for years. We met a couple of months ago. But together, there's a film crew standing around us. There are a number of different people. It's like a piece of a puzzle. We're all coming together to do something unique, hopefully something that is positive, hopefully something that can change lives. But it doesn't matter how good I write. If no one is asking me questions like you, no one may never know. And now with the filming, it'll go even further. So I would say, never underestimate your power, your presence.
And here we
need
are.
Each other.
Yeah, and here we are talking about the economics of discrimination, which is a topic that many of us were hesitant to discuss in today's climate, but yet we're taking it on, and we're meeting the challenge, and we're discovering ways in which to improve everyone's understanding of not only what it means to discriminate, but opportunities to move around some of the challenges. In fact, I think you have an article that you wanted to briefly mention.
Yeah, I did an article for Leader to Leader, and this was founded by Peter Drucker before he passed away many years ago. But it's really helping leaders to understand how to meet the challenges, discover the opportunities by getting outside of the box. And the box is an easy place to be because you're usually comfortable there. Even though you know it's not accomplishing all that you want, but you know what you know. And many of us are afraid to go beyond what we know. But in the 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci made an incredible statement. Do not be constrained by your present reality. That is somewhat akin to, just because this is what you know, don't assume this is all you will ever know. And had he not embraced such an attitude, we would not have the Mona Lisa today. We have the Mona Lisa because Leonardo da Vinci was determined to find new avenues, new innovative approaches to painting, discovering and understanding the human body in such a way. And this is what happens to any of us when we decide to move outside of the box. We put ourselves on a pathway of innovative discovery.
Well, that's a great way to end our conversation, and my hope is that we stay in touch. And with the viewers, we have numerous ways in which you can stay in touch with us and continue your journey and to learn more about Clifton, but also learn much more about what the Hammond Institute is doing, because our hope is that we can help you.